Assalamu alaikum. So, my dear students, today I'm going to record this session. In this session, we are going to discuss about the new topic, which is on stock valuation. In this chapter, we shall be covering what are stocks and what how do we compute their valuation. So we'll be discussing the concepts of these stocks, different types of stocks, features of these stocks. So all concepts related to the stocks, and then we shall be discussing certain valuations related to the stocks, how stocks are valuated, how their prices are valuated, how their dividends are valuated, and etc. and etc. So this chapter is all about stocks valuation. In the previous chapter, we discussed about the bond valuation. We discussed what are bonds, what are different types of bonds, how bonds are valuated, how coupon is calculated, what is coupon, how the price of bond is calculated. So all those discussions were related to the bonds. So bonds are fixed income securities. So in this chapter, we are going to discuss about the stocks, which are not fixed income securities. Fixed income securities means securities against which you get fixed return every month or every year. So for example, you buy a bond, so you get a predetermined rate, and that you will be getting this much amount of interest by year end, and that is fixed and that is guaranteed. However, in stocks, these are not fixed income securities. When you buy stocks, you will be getting some return out of it in the form of dividend, but that dividend return is not guaranteed, that is not predetermined. So it completely depends on the performance of an organization. If an organization is performing well, so you'll be getting dividend out of it. But however, if an organization is not performing well, or they have performed well, but they have decided, the board of directors of an organization have decided that they are not going to distribute dividends this year. Instead, they are going to reinvest those profits into the organization. So in that case, you will not be getting any return, or you will not be getting the full return against your share. So that is why we call stocks are not fixed income securities. So we have bonds, we have stocks, we have discussed bonds already. So in this chapter, we shall be discussing stocks in for incomplete. So first we'll be discussing, we'll be doing some theoretical discussion on stocks. What are their concepts, and what are their formulas and valuation models. So following that, we'll be having some practical questions and some problems to solve those models and formulas. All right. So these are the contents mentioned in the first slide, which we are going to cover in this chapter. Number one is features of common stock. What are the features of common stock? What do we mean by common stock? What are the characteristics, attributes of common stocks? So this is the first thing we shall be discussing. And the second thing is determining common stock values, as I was discussing earlier. So we'll be discussing the values of common stock, how common stocks are calculated. So valuation of common stocks. Then we have efficient markets. So what do we mean by efficient market? What do we mean by efficient market hypothesis? So that is also related to the stocks. This will also be covered at the end of this chapter. And finally, we shall be discussing preferred stock in separate. So preferred stock is one of the type of these stocks. We have already discussed this in some other chapter. So these preferred stocks are one of the types of stocks. But the point is, so in this entire chapter, most of the discussion would be related to the common stocks. So especially the valuation model we will be discussing, those valuation models would primarily be related to the common stocks, not preferred stocks. So how preferred stocks would be calculated, valued. So for that, we shall cover at the end of this chapter. All right. I hope I have made my point clear. So we have four main agenda items in this chapter: the features of the common stock, the valuation models of the common stock, the efficient market concepts, and then finally preferred stock. So let's start them one by one. The first one is feature of the common stock. All right. Let me take some pointer with myself. mouse. All right, this would be fine, hopefully. All right. So the heading says at the top of this slide, the heading says facts about the common stock or features about the common stock. Number one represents ownership. It is very clear. The common stocks give you an ownership. If you buy a stock, so you'll be getting ownership of that particular organization. For instance, you are buying a stock of Anglo Corporation, or you are buying a stock of Unilever, or you are buying a stock of Lucky Cement. So against that purchase, against that stock, you are getting ownership share in that particular organization. You are going to be the proportionate owner of that organization. For example, I have purchased a share of Anglo Lucky Cement. You have purchased a share of Lucky Cement. Both of us have purchased a share of Lucky Cement. So both of us are proportionate ownership of that organization, Lucky Cement. So all those people who have purchased shares of Lucky Cement, all of them are owners of Lucky Cement. All of them are owners of assets of the Lucky Cement in accordance with with their proportionate shares. So if I have purchased, for instance, I have purchased 10 shares, you have purchased 20 shares. So you'll be getting more ownership share, and I'll be getting lesser ownership share. All right. So the more you buy, the more ownership share you get. The lesser you buy, and the lesser you get in the ownership share in that particular organization. So stock basically provides us ownership in that particular organization. In contrast, in bonds, which we discussed in the previous chapter, there we do not get the ownership in an organization. If I have bonds is basically a loan. So I have if I have given you some amount of money against a bond, so actually I have lended that amount to you. I am a lender, you are a borrower. So the relationship between us is lending and borrowing. So I'm not getting any ownership in your organization against that lended amount. Instead, I have just lent you. You are supposed to pay me back after at the time of maturity with pre-decided interest on it. So I have lended you, for instance, 1 million rupees. So against a bond, so this 1 million is loan on yourself. You are going to pay me back against after a maturity time, whatever is the maturity time decided between us. So you are going to return me back that principal amount. In addition to that, you are going to pay me an interest which we must have already discussed at the time of giving you a loan. All right. So in bonds, we do not get ownership, but in contrast, in shares, we get ownership. If I have given you 1 million rupees against shares of your organization, so I have not given you a loan. I have not lended you. Instead, I have purchased a proportionate share in your organization. I have bought a share in your organization against my share. So I'm going to be your partner. I'm going to be the owner of your organization in accordance to my proportionate share. All right. So stocks basically share represent ownership. By the way, let me clear here. Okay, I have been using the word stock and stock again and again. So in industry, practically stocks and shares are used interchangeably. So you say the share of an organization, or you say the stock of an organization. Both mean the same thing. This is the same thing. You call it share or you call it stock. This is the same thing. All right. So the first point we discussed was represents ownership, that stocks provide us an ownership in an organization. The next thing is connected with the first point, that is in ownership implies control. When you buy a share, you get an ownership. Against that ownership, you get a control in that organization. You get a proportionate control in that organization. If you have higher number of shares for any particular of any particular organization, so you will be having more control, relatively more control in that organization. But if I have purchased the shares of that same organization, but I have purchased lesser share than you, so I'll be having lesser control than you, obviously. So stocks basically provides us ownership, and against that, and in virtue of that ownership, we get control in that organization. For instance, let me make it simple first. Three of us, myself, yourself, and one third person, three of us are owner of an organization. So all three of us are shareholder, are proportionate owner of that organization, so that the control of that organization, the authority, all the authority, the decision power would be with us. So similarly, if you are buying a share of any organization, so you are getting an ownership, and with that ownership, you are getting an authority, a control, a decision power in that organization. But the point is, what we must realize, that in a professional organization, the number of shares, the number of shareholders are very high. So they are, the shareholders are in millions and billions. 100,000 people own the share of an organization. For example, take the example of Lucky Cement. So there must be millions, or hundreds of millions of people who would be owning the share of organization of Lucky Cement. So all those hundred of million people are the owners of Lucky Cement. So all of them have control in that organization, but obviously it varies according to the number of shares a particular person holds. So for example, there's a person, the director, the CEO, or the founding member of Lucky Cement owns, for instance, 60% of shares, and rest of the people own 40% of the share. So the 60%, the major share is the founding is with the founding member. So the major control would remain with the founding member, because he or she is a major shareholder of that organization. So other people would also be having the control, but since their shares are in less, they have lesser share in their organization, so they'll be having the lesser control. So the control is in accordance with your ownership share. So how it is exercised, by the way. So for if you are buying the share of Lucky Cement, so you'll be having control, and you may exercise your control. The mechanism which is followed for that is, okay, every organization is supposed to hold its annual general meeting every year, so which is known as AGM, annual general meeting. So in that annual general meeting, all the shareholders are invited, and the annual performance of an organization is showed to them, and then their votes, their opinions, their concerns are invited. So the management of an organization, the board of directors of an organization invite all the shareholders, and those shareholders have the right to raise their voice, they raise their concerns, and give their opinion. So obviously the decision power is not with them, the decision power is with the board of directors. Reason being, those board of directors are normally the major shareholders, so decision power remains with the major shareholders. All right. So you are the minor shareholder, so you will be having the control, but your control would be relatively very lesser, and you would be exercising that control in the form of raising your voice in annual general meeting, or you may write a letter to the organization office as well. This may also be an option. All right. So that was the second point. The ownership implies control. The next thing is, the stakeholders elect stockholders elect directors. So when you are owners, when you are a shareholder, you have an ownership, and against that ownership, you have a control on that organization, and using that control, you elect directors of an organization. You are a shareholder. You are not practically running the organization. You elect some directors. Those directors are responsible to look after and run the organization. So normally, 7 directors, 9 directors, 11 directors are elected to run an organization. So all those directors are elected by shareholders, stockholders. So normally what happens is, all those directors are also the shareholders. So the shareholders make themselves the director of an organization. So shareholders are also normally they all normally own the shares of an organization, like you and me. So they are also the shareholders, they are also the owners of an organization. So but since they own most of the shares of an organization, so they become the directors. So you and I just own 500 shares, for 1,000 shares, 5,000 shares, 100,000 shares of an organization. But those directors own shares of an organization in millions and in hundreds of millions. 20% shares, 30% shares, 40% of total shares, 60% of total shares are owned by directors. So since those are the major shareholders, so they themselves become the directors of an organization. This is normally the case. So that was the third point. Stockholders elect directors. So the next is directors elect management. Directors elect management. So there are seven directors, nine directors. Obviously all those nine directors cannot run the organization by their own. So what they do, they elect management, senior management, middle management, president, vice presidents, directors, assistant vice presidents, deputy directors, or CEOs, CFOs, COOs, treasury, general manager, senior managers, head of finance, director of finance. So different titles are used in different organizations. So all those are the part of management. So and that management is elected by directors. So directors run the organization with the help of management. So they choose their own team, they develop their own team. So that is why they elect management. All right. And then the last point comes management's goal. Management goals, management is elected. All right, so everything is in sequence, everything is connected with each other. We started with you buy a share, so against that share you get an ownership. That ownership gives you a control of an organization. So using that control you elect directors. Then the directors develop their team, which is known as management. They develop their management, they hire their management, and that management which is hired by directors, their goal, their purpose, their objective is maximize the stock price. Maximize the stock price. So please try to realize, okay, try to connect the dots. So you started with buying a share, buying a share. All right. So and you end up with the management, hiring of management. So that management is responsible to maximize the price of a share which you have purchased. You have purchased a share, so you would be interested in the higher and higher price of that share. So for instance, you have purchased a share of Lucky Cement in 400 rupees per share, for instance, 400 rupees per share. So you would be interested that the price of that share should go high and high. You would be interested in the maximum price of that share, so that if you sell it tomorrow or someday, so you must be getting some capital gain, you must be getting some profit. You have purchased on 400 rupees per share, so you would be interested to get higher and higher price. For instance, if it is sold for 500, so you will be getting a capital gain of 100 rupees on that share. So stockholders, shareholders are always interested in the share prices. So higher the share prices, so more stockholders are satisfied. So the goal of management is to maximize shareholders price or maximize stock price. if you remember if you remember in the first chapter in this course, and the chapter was introduction to financial management, there we also discussed the same thing in a little bit detail, that the objective of an organization or the objective of a management is to maximize shareholders wealth. Maximize shareholders wealth. So this is the same thing which we are discussing now. So if you want to maximize shareholders wealth, so you can do it by maximizing the price of a stock, the maximizing the by maximizing the price of a share which stockholders own. So this is the same thing. The objective of an organization is to maximize stockholders share, stockholders wealth, or maximize stockholders share price. All right. So these are the basic, some of the basic facts which we have discussed that when we buy a share, the shares and bonds are opposite of each other. Bonds are fixed income securities. Shares are not fixed income securities. Bonds, against bonds, we get fixed interest, fixed amount of interest, whereas in shares we do not get fixed amount of interest. Rather, it is based on the performance organization. You may be getting more return, or maybe getting lesser return, or in some year you'll be getting higher return, and on another year, some other year, you are getting lesser return. So this is the beauty, or this is the mechanism, or that this is the nature of a share or of a stock. All right, so stock gives us ownership. Against ownership, we get control. That control, using that control, we elect our directors are then select their management, and that management runs the entire organization, and all the operations are objectivized by that maximizing the stock price. All right. So moving forward, stocks and stock market. All right, so in the previous slide we discussed some of the basic facts of common stock. So in this one we are going to discuss stocks and stock market. So we'll be discussing the stock market, what are the stock markets, and we'll be discussing certain concepts related to the stocks from here onwards. All right, hang on a minute please. So I feel ke So I feel that I should stop this one recording over here, and and get it saved, and make and develop another recording from here onward. All right. So I'm signing off from this one, and this is going to be the part one of this chapter in the form of recording. So see you back in the second part. All right. Thank you.